So the incense offered, the verse on opening the gatha intoned, inviting us to the incomparably profound and minutely subtle reality of this practice, this gathering, this place, the zendo, the cloud, here. As Henry likes to say, one here. This very moment. The gatha or verse comes to us from Dogen. We opened the main block of this day of shared practice with a verse by Rumi, a contemporary of Dogen. Rumi was born 7 years after Dogen. He lived a longer life, but very much contemporary. So here again is Rumi's verse, his call to us. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vow 100 times. Come, come again. Come. Come and arrive exactly where you are. Today, I'd like to explore this invitation by keeping company with two women from this Zen or Chan tradition. One, an old woman, known to us because of her encounter with an imposing scholar from the Tang Dynasty, a man who became a towering figure in the lineage of Zen masters. The old woman is wise, challenging, and unnamed. Her voice lost to history apart from this one exchange. The other woman is Mora O'Halleran, a young Irish Catholic seeker who entered a monastery in Japan. Was a rarity, still is, to practice as a monk alongside the men in this kindred company. Mora practiced intensely, wholeheartedly, and awakened to the freedom and compassion of her birthright, realized right here in each of us. Her voice rings out some 40 years now, maybe 41, after her death. There was an article, several articles came out in the New York Times and Tricycle elsewhere, all around really, in 1994, when her mother had compiled Mora's many journal entries and letters. This one article begins, "Religion," suggested Nietzsche, "is the last refuge of weaklings and cowards. But the truth," this is from a particular perspective, the New York Times. The article says, "But the truth is otherwise. One thinks of Gandhi facing a line of British clubs, or Thomas More venturing one last quip as he awaits the executioner's axe. there is another kind of spiritual courage as well, quieter and less celebrated, but just as remarkable, that of making each day, in its most conventional aspects, cooking, eating, breathing, an oblation to the absolute. The article, this sort of encomium, says, of such bravery cast in this instance in the Buddhist mold is the brief and moving life of Mora O'Halleran. There's an article about the same time in Tricycle by Sarah Fremmerman. Just a brief excerpt. As O'Halleran's practice deepens, she speaks of that state of consciousness not as some mysterious beyond, but as an awareness that is close, familiar, emerging from within herself. Not some mysterious beyond. I'm reminded again of Reuben and his love of that line from Toy Story. To infinity and beyond. And the beyond is right here. That's so clear for Mora. After 6 months of entering the monastery, she experiences an opening and writes, everything was simple. I was laughing. Mu was only mu. I felt ecstatic, couldn't contain my joy. I ran out of the hall, kissed the trees, stood in the garden, and was the garden. Really was it. All through dinner I beamed. The others, these monks, had described enlightenment. The others, perhaps also the tradition. She goes on, this was so much stronger. I didn't meditate that night, only lay wrapped snug in bed, listening to the rain. Part of her practice, she just plunged into this old tradition that goes certainly back to Dogen, of sitting, practicing 1,000 days, and the frame of the practice, whether it's completely done that way, is to sleep 3 hours a night, sitting in Zazen posture with a wooden, they made these chin rests so you could actually sleep while sitting. She does say sometimes she would wake up and find herself prone on the zendo floor or asleep on a bag of rice in the kitchen. In her journal, after this experience, she wrote, suddenly I understood that we must take care of things just because they exist. Fremmerman continues her description of Mora. As time passes, her identification with everything around her increases. Mora writes that in a session when someone would have kensho, that is this first glimpse, this shift, this awakening, this coming home, somehow tasting for yourself in an utterly recognizable way, though we have no idea how it comes. But she says that would happen to someone. It felt that it was, I was the one who was relieved. Pulling weeds, she finds, they were part of me, but different, like the back and front of my hand are different, but not separate. Mora was born in the States to an American mother and an Irish father. When the family was 4, they moved to Ireland, and she was enrolled in convent schools. Happy childhood. When she was 14, her father was killed in an accident. She's the oldest of 6 children, and so steps in to have a real primary role in caring for her siblings. In 1977, Mora graduated from Trinity College Dublin with an honors degree in mathematical economics, statistics, and sociology. Another article describes, from a young age, Mora displayed a deep awareness of human suffering. After college, she spent time working in soup kitchens and traveled widely in Latin America. Her concern for social justice was accompanied by a serious attraction to the spiritual life. After experimenting for some years with various methods of prayer and meditation, she decided to explore the wisdom of the East. This past Thursday, here at Mountain Cloud, Teshin Swager gave the Dharma talk, taking a deep dive into the wisdom of the East. Teshin began and ended his talk with the Parinirvana Sutra, the record of the Buddha's death. And then within that frame, he raised the question of life and death, so often written with hyphens, one word, life and death, what Zen calls the great matter. The talk explored the unbinding of physical death, the 4 elements, disentangling, dispersing. At one point, Teshin turned to Tosotsu's 3rd barrier. It's a famous koan, 3 of them, but the 3rd one just asks, here's one translation: when the parts that make you all fall apart, where will you go? Or another translation, when your 4 elements separate and just gone, where will you go? It's not a discursive question. Also, not inquiring into our views of the afterlife, whatever they may be. What about that great unbinding? What if Tosotsu is pointing to this right now? As one master put it, sit with impermanence on the tip of your nose. In the course of his talk, Teshin used the word extinguish. It jumped out like a spark. Impermanent, unbounded, extinguished. The unbinding is a gradual process, a practice, years long, fortunately. And this unbinding comes in an instant. One cut. This was an example Teshin offered. One cut and the Gordian knot falls open. One gesture, one sound, even one thought, and the binding dissolves, extinguished, unbinding. That's what this is. The spark of Teshin's talk brought up the image of a famous awakening from this remarkably rich koan collection that we have, the many collections. It's Toksan or Daishan, who's facing Master Ryutan, this great master, and asking for instruction. The case says they talk deep into the night, possibly about the Diamond Sutra, a sutra that presents the teaching of no self, no sign, and no aim, that is, no goal. Finally, it's getting late, time to go to bed. Toksan makes his bows and turns to leave. It's pitch black outside, he says, turning back. Actually, pitch black inside as well. Ryutan lights a lantern and hands it to Toksan. And just as he takes hold of it, Ryutan blows it out. Just that. It's suddenly gone. And suddenly everything illumined. That's the apex of the story, but not the beginning. Not the setup that throws Toksan into great doubt. Not the encounter that cracks his firm facade. Not the turning word that turns him around on his path and plants the possibility of waking up. That encounter is with an unnamed old woman who's selling tea and rice cakes at the edge of the road. The road Toksan travels with his Diamond Sutra commentaries and copious notes in tow. Travels south to uproot the Zen, this Zen school of sudden awakening. The old woman doesn't make it into the koan, into the case, but her story is the focus of Mumon's commentary. Mumon, who compiled all of these cases and wrote a commentary and a verse for each one. Her story is also the subject of a vivid reflection by Joan Halifax, a chapter in that lovely collection, The Hidden Lamp, 25 Centuries of Awakened Women. So I'd just like to share an excerpt from Mumon's commentary on the case. This is from case 28 in this Gateless Gate, or Mumonkan. Before Toksan had crossed the border, his mind was full of resentment and his mouth speechless with anger. He wanted to go all the way south, intending to refute the doctrine of the special transmission outside the sutras. That is, this possibility of just waking up in an instant. When he got to the road to the province of Ray, he asked an old woman if he could buy a tenjin from her. That tenjin is a sweet. The word also means pointing to the mind. Can I buy one of those from you? The old woman said, Your Reverence, what are all those books you're carrying in the cart? Toksan said, Those are commentaries on the Diamond Sutra. And the old woman said, In that sutra, it says, the past mind can't be caught. The present mind can't be caught. The future mind can't be caught. Your Reverence, with which mind are you going to take the tenjin? Momon says this one question tightly shut Toksan's mouth. But hearing the old woman's words, he still did not completely die away. So he asks for a master, and she sends him to Ryudan. The past mind can't be caught. The present mind can't be caught. The future mind can't be caught. Toksan's mouth is shut. No more theory, no explaining. Still, he does not completely die away. Some vestige of concepts, of structure, of some artifice still hanging on. But what about us? We sit here returning again and again to the present moment. What moment is that? With which moment are you going to take this breath? Hear this sound? You'll never be able to catch it. You can't grasp it. You are it. Nothing but this breath, breathing, listening. This one entirety. Right here. Joan Halifax writes of this woman, she is the Diamond Sutra itself, signless and aimless. She is nobody we know, and at the same time, she is an intimate manifestation of some kind of wild and cranky freedom. I could say that about Joan. Through her, Joan says, there is no abiding, no attachment. The Diamond Sutra says, dwelling nowhere, mind comes forth. No self, no sign. Might as well be saying, no book. And no aim. Abiding nowhere. Mind comes forth. Blue. Sound, the light on the floor. People in this room, all together. This one entirety coming forth. Actually not from anywhere. What could we attach to? Who is there Who is there to do the attaching? Mumon says in his commentary on Mu, that first case, exhaust yourself in Mu. Exhaust yourself in this breath, in this body, in this sound. He writes, if you do not give up on the way, you will be enlightened the way a candle in front of the altar is lighted by one touch of fire. Blown out, suddenly lit. This one illumining. Just this. Mora O'Halleran experienced this and was overwhelmed by compassion. She wrote, I want to live my life for other people. It's as if to give myself is all I can do. To take care of every single thing just because it exists. And then as she prepares to leave the monastery, she writes, I'm 26, and I feel as if I've lived my life. Strange sensation, almost as if I'm close to death. Any desires, ambitions, hopes I may have had have either been fulfilled or spontaneously dissipated. I'm totally content. Of course, I want to get deeper, see clearer, but even if I could only have this paltry, shallow awakening, I'd be quite satisfied. So, in a sense, I feel I've died. For myself, there is nothing else to strive after. Nothing more to make my life worthwhile or to justify it. At 26, a living corpse, at such a life. If I have another 50 or 60 years, who knows, of time, I want to live it for other people. What else is there to do with it? So I must go deeper and deeper and work hard. No longer for me, but for everyone I can help. The postscript to Mora's writings describes this great freedom as recognizing that practice itself is awakening. So making her way back to Ireland, she's returning home to teach. She had this vision of carrying the Dharma to Ireland, of establishing a zendo, of offering whatever she could. She does a little traveling, first with her brother and then on her own. She's on a bus going through Thailand. The bus is full, and the one place left is sitting right next to the driver. So there she clambers up into that place, and they're driving along, and the bus just falls off the road, falls off the mountain. Actually, everybody survives, but the driver and Mora. My life is complete, if only this, entirely satisfied. And yet, or we could say, and so, practice never ends. We know the saying, Shakyamuni Buddha is still practicing. We don't just know it. We are it. So also the old woman offering the dharma under the guise of tea and cakes, extinguishing everything. So Mora, immersed in the freedom and compassion of this one empty, infinite world, and inviting us to come home to things just as they are, to do what is ours to do. With thanks, great gratitude to these teachers for this dharma, this incomparable, minutely subtle, infinitely dynamic dharma. Immersed in it all, in this unconditional gratitude. Unconditional not knowing. Let's continue our practice. Thank you.